Hello, my dear ones, and welcome to another episode of Conversations with My Higher Self. We have an exciting topic to cover today. We are going to be talking about the air elementals. Before we dive in, a couple of housekeeping items. First things first, thank you for everyone who reached out, sent me a DM on Instagram after my previous episode. I'm glad you enjoyed it and very much noted on the episodes that you are requesting. So thank you for the feedback. You know who you are. Secondly, if you haven't gotten my book, 72 Keys for Manifestation, An Ancient Path of a Modern Day Alchemist, I think you should. I have started getting feedback from people who have completed reading the book, and the feedback has been beautiful. I'm happy, I'm thrilled that you guys are seeing so much progress in your lives. I'm not that wasn't expected, but it's always nice to know that you acknowledge it and recognize it. And, I'm really excited about your lives shifting so much. This book is a journey. It's really a journey of 72 steps. Unfortunately, you can skip them, although you can read them in random order. And it is meant to be completed. The 72 steps are meant to be completed. But once that happens, it really alchemizes and transforms your life. So if you haven't checked it out, you should. It's available on Amazon. And last but not least, if you haven't checked out my second podcast called Our Sacred Universe, you should. There are a lot of new meditations up and coming, and some of them have to do with elementals. So if you're curious, a lot of really, really amazing content is coming on that front. That being said, why don't we dive right in? We have a very rich topic today. Frankly, I am worried I may not be able to cover the entirety of the topic in just one episode, so we'll take it as it comes. I want to keep this episodes manageable for you in terms of length, and we shall see when we need to do a second one on the air elementals. Cool. So why don't we dive right in? Okay, so one of the technical terms to describe the air elementals is the Sylphs. Now, granted, it is not necessarily the most ideal term, but this one, again, we owe to Paracelsus, who was an alchemist in the Middle Ages, and he was let's say, one of the more recent humans who produced a fairly convincing ontology and classification of the elementals. So we will go with his classification. There is so much misinformation on the face of planet Earth around elementals in general. A lot of lapses in classification, if I say so myself. But more importantly, the information that does exist is incomplete. And so I'm really excited to be talking to you about this topic today, because sometimes transforming our life starts with transforming our relationships with one of the elemental classes. And of the different types of elementals that we're going to be discussing, the element of air is one of the more important ones. There's only so long you can live without taking a breath. And that should give you a proxy of how important these creatures are, and building a relationship with them is in your life. Now, whether you realize it or not, you all have a relationship with these creatures. Whether that is a positive one or a negative one, I think is a big question. Now, there are some pointers that you may have around understanding what those relationships, what the relationship that you have is with the air elementals. For example, chances are, if you're doing a lot of breath work, you have improved your relationship with elementals. If you have a lot of house plants, it also happens to be really, really correlated with your relationship with elementals. How so? Air elementals love clean air, because that essentially they represent that medium. And so they like all the things that purify the air and dislike all the things that pollute the air, right? So people who like to, open their windows and make sure that the fresh air is available in their houses. People that, again, have a lot of houseplants that purify the air. People that have air purifiers tend to have a better relationship with the air elementals. And then, of course, there's the reverse of that as well. But why don't we take it one step at a time? And why don't we talk about the first class of air elementals? And as we look at the different types of elementals, I'm going to go ahead and tell you and give you kind of like factoids about the classes as a whole. So the first type of air elemental I wanted to talk to you about today is the wind. Kind of almost obvious, right? Why wouldn't we start with the wind? However, not all wind is created equal. There is a whole range of wind elementals out there. There are some that are considered senior in status, others that are considered mid-level, and then there are your junior wind elementals. Why don't we start from the top and see what else we have time for? So when we are trying to comprehend the types of wind elementals, probably the most important and the easiest classification I could offer you is identifying the wind by the direction it is blowing from. So essentially, as far as high level, high wind elementals are concerned, there are 4. You have your north wind, you have your south wind, east wind, and your west wind. In the old times, when humanity was really adept at building relationships with elementals, every human took the time to understand each of the wind elementals, to pay homage to their energy, as well as, very often humans would call in on a particular type of wind in order to achieve their worldly goals. This is very much a forgotten practice. This is not even, it's pretty much the realm of unknown as I scan the human collective. So I figured we'd start reinvigorating this. In order to understand what each wind can help you with, you need to understand a little bit about their personality. Why don't we start with the north wind? The north wind is the elder of the brothers. All the winds are actually masculine spirits. And the north wind is almost like the grandfather of the winds. I hate to say this. He is much, much older looking than the rest of them. Very often, if he would appear to you in meditation or otherwise, you would see him as a bearded elderly man, quite grumpy. And, he almost, if you guys are familiar with the archetype of Saturn, the planet, it's very similar to the north wind. So what is this wind good for? First, it has a very, very big, very well built out connection with ice, or Isa, the rune of the Nordic pantheon, the Nordic Futhark. So if you guys are, familiar with that rune, or if you're in general just, if you think about the element of ice, it is all about freezing something. So obviously the Nordic winds, the north wind generally takes its root in the north, right? That's where it blows from. So the north wind is also the zeroing of the energies. It symbolizes winter, and winter is the time where everything goes to sleep to be rebirthed on the other side, hopefully when the spring comes. So that is your north wind. It's the winter timing. So what can the north wind help with? Anything that you need to freeze over. Let's say it is a disease that is progressing rapidly and you no longer want the disease to progress. You can work with the north wind to help slow the disease down and ice it over. That could be one. The north wind is also really good. Actually, most of the wind energies are really, really good at bringing about change. it's the kind of change that they're bringing that is potentially worth exploring. The north wind is really good at bringing about the type of change where it is able to remove suboptimal things away from your life. Whether that is an obstacle, whether that is a relationship, any struggle that you have, any impediment, you can call in on the north wind to remove those obstacles. Because it is the older, it is also one of the stronger winds of the four. And definitely way stronger than some of the minor winds. What does that mean? It means that literally, when it blows at full force, it can blow away any impediment, right? And that is how you can use its pretty unique power in order to move through certain tough situations in your life. So that is the north wind. Then the next wind that, people of the old, so essentially when you would, in the cultures, in the societies, let's say, a lot of them were tribal cultures that used to honor the wind. They would very often start with the grandfather of the winds, the north wind, and then they would move almost like in a clockwise direction. Next, they would introduce themselves to the east wind, then the south wind, and they would finish it out with the west wind. The second wind is the east wind, and that symbolizes spring in terms of season. So we're going from winter to spring. This is also the youngest of the winds. This is kind of your divine child archetype, the east wind. So he's like the young boy of about 12 to 14 years old is how I would describe their age, whereas the north wind is more like in his 80s. Your east wind is in his teens, really, give or take. And so the east wind is really good to work with and to connect with when you need to start a new project. Anything that you're creating the seeds for, anything that you want to establish a really, really good ground base for. It's kind of like almost like the new moon energy, if you know what I mean. If you work with the moon energies, you know exactly what I mean. It's one of the forces that helps you grow things. It is one of the forces that help you kind of like help ground your intention as well as nurture your intentions. So anytime you require any type of growth, whether that is growth in your salary, growth in your business, the progress of your relationships, the progress of your career, whatever that is, you may want to talk to the east wind. The east wind has its positives and it has its negatives. The positives is that it likes to move fast. It's very quick. It is a quick decision maker. It's actually it's the easiest wind to befriend because every elemental is actually quite temperamental. I'm not sure I've told you that before, right? Every elemental actually has a choice of whether they want to work with you or they don't. It's completely up to them. Nobody, and I mean nobody, can make an elemental work with you or help you unless the elemental truly and legitimately wants to do that. Why would an elemental want to help you? Very often, there's something about you that may resonate with that elemental. Something about your character, something else that they like about your history. As I mentioned in my previous episode about the fire elementals, they're also judging you by the crystal that you have in your higher heart around your thymus area, which is an etheric crystal, an energy crystal, that essentially gives them access to your Akashic records. And it's a full-blown access, meaning instead of like going through every single record that the Akashic records have on you, this crystal is going to have a sum total of your energies. And that makes it really, really easy for any type of elemental that comes into contact with you to understand who you are and what you're all about, right? Because they're essentially just looking at the vibrations of the crystal, the color, and the aura of that crystal, and they can tell everything about you, right? So it's very easy for them to make a spur-of-the-moment decision on whether they want to work with you or not. So the east wind tends to be the type of wind energy, the kind of wind energy that is the easiest to befriend. It is the least judgmental one, unlike the north wind, who is the most judgmental one. The north wind tends to favor older souls, and by that I just mean the souls that have been around for longer and potentially are a little bit more developed. Whereas the east wind doesn't really discriminate, and so it just the east wind himself, and I'm going to use he again, because I told you that the spirit is masculine. The east wind himself is very excited about growing things, and it also has a little bit of ADHD. It's kind of like how I would describe that energy. So it likes all kinds of things. As long as you give it stuff to do, it's going to like want to help you grow, and it's going to want to help you achieve things. And, as long as you're not asking it to remain the same and help you maintain something, that is not what this wind is all about. So the good news is this wind is really friendly, for the lack of a better word. The bad news is it doesn't have a really good attention span. So it's actually really, really hard to get the east wind to be a forever ally. And you have to keep reconnecting with it because it also forgets things easily. And so you have to come back and kind of like remind him who you are and that you have a relationship. It's a little bit of that, which is actually quite rare for elementals. Most elementals remember you very, very well, but east wind, not so much. Okay, moving on. The next one is the south wind. The season here is summer, and that is about a middle-aged wind. So this wind is, in his 30s, 40s, a little bit nondescript in terms of age, but kind of like middle-aged like this. And wow, so this wind is also the closest I would that the winds come to like being androgynous. So this one, yes, technically is a masculine spirit, but he's very close to the middle of the spectrum between masculine and feminine. So very often he may appear as a she, actually, not to confuse you guys. But if you start working with his energies, you would know exactly what I mean. And by the way, anybody who starts working with these elementals is going to see roughly the same thing that I'm describing, right? Because we are talking particular energies, and we are talking, these are the beings that exist, right? So your interactions with them and your perception of them should be very similar to what I'm describing. So the south wind is the wind that actually really decides whether you are going to reap the benefits and collect the harvest when the time comes. I like to think of it as the wind of the pinnacle of something, the culmination of something, the core crux of something, right? It's that energy of like being in your prime. This wind actually it likes hard. So the things that it likes, and what are some of the things that may make it want to work with you? This wind likes hard workers, and it is a stickler for justice. So it likes, or he likes, or she likes, like this one I'm calling an it. I just caught myself because he's really close to that middle of the spectrum. So essentially he is a stickler for justice, right? And balance. And so that is why prior to you being able to have the harvest, which happens in the fall, it is really the summer that decides whether that, your sprouts are truly going to take root and bring you a lot of harvest or not, right? And it's a little bit of the judgy archetype, actually. So very often, again, it loves hard work. It loves true determination. It loves people who are willing to just go for it and that don't give up. So it really loves people who are go-getters, hustlers. This is your kind of wind. So when the wind is blowing from the south, it generally carries forward the boats that would have already reached their destination anyhow, if that makes sense, right? So it speeds things up that are already going right. If you need things to change course or change direction, the south wind is not your buddy. Your east wind is probably your better bet. However, if you already are on track, the south wind can help you amplify things. So he is the great amplifier. He's also the one that is the closest connected to the energy of the sun. So whatever properties the sun has, the south wind would have to some degree as well. So that is the property of manifestation. the property of self-confidence, right? Really pure masculine energies, having direction in life, knowing where you're going in life, knowing how to get there, being very logical, etc., etc., etc. So that's your south wind. And again, having a connection with the south wind is really important in the middle of your project, whatever project that is, whether you're halfway through school, whether you are, you already started a project, but you haven't quite taken it to fruition. Establishing a relationship with the south wind could actually really help you amplify the success of that project and bring the fruit and the harvest sooner. So amplify and speed things up. That is, the south wind is actually extremely impatient. And another thing that this wind is good for is actually, it does have purifying properties like any fire. And I know that that's, the wind is air, but what I mean by that is, remember how I told you that this wind has the connection to the sun? And so in the old days, this wind would emerge during the hottest season of the year, right? So it's the hot wind. I don't know if you guys have ever been to the desert, but it's the kind of wind that almost like burns your skin when it hits you. It's that kind of wind. That's always the south wind. And so it can be quite scorching, but because it is scorching, it has the properties of fire, of purification. So it could also help purify an egregore, an energetic structure, a project, anything, any unit. That is what the south wind is good for. Moving on to the west wind. The west wind is the fall season. So on the one hand, it's the harvesting. It's the reaping of what you saw. It is also the reckoning and the true judgment, but the judgment that kind of comes after the fact, not in the middle of the game. Whereas the south wind is deciding whether you should get the harvest or not. The west wind is drawing up the tally of everything that you did to get to this point. So the west wind is all about completing the cycle. The west wind is all about putting a full stop at the end of the sentence. It's about dotting your I's and crossing your T's. The west wind is really, really important to call on or into when you're ending a large cycle of your life or a big relationship for you, because it'll do two things. First, it would enable you to walk out of a situation having learned 100% of everything that you were meant to learn in it. That is why another thing the west wind is, it is the wind of karma. It is something that helps you bring things to a close. Close down the loops, tie all the ends, again, make sure that something is in full completion to the best, to your benefit and to the benefit of others. And the other thing it'll help you do is release, right? Not only does it help you finish the cycle, it also helps you release the energies that no longer belong. Let's say it is a relationship. The west wind is going to help you release all of the things and let go of all of the things that no longer serve you, that are no longer meant to stay with you as you're moving away from that relationship. So anytime you close a project down, or not a project, anytime you're coming to a completion of something in your life, it could be a really healing practice for you to reach out to the west wind so that the west wind could guide you through the process of completion. The west wind is also extremely healing when you're going through the period of mourning a loved one or a loss of any kind. Anything from your house burned down to whatever loss, you lost a friendship, it doesn't really matter, right? Whatever loss you're going through, and definitely if you're going through mourning, the kind of wind that's going to help you deal with it is the west wind, because it understands what it takes to move through the ebbs and flows and reemerge on the other side as healed as is humanly possible. So this energy is really, really, really good to call in on when you are, feeling desperate, when you're feeling like you cannot get through a tough period in your life, because it really helps relieve the pressure and release the negativity around you. So those are the winds. Now, of course, the best the best thing is to be able to have a relationship with each of the four. However, if you befriend one, you don't necessarily befriend the other. So I think that you should probably start with a kind of wind that resonates with you the most, right? The ones, the one that created the most resonance in your physical body, as I was telling you about the winds. And this is the one that you should try to connect with at first. One note here. If you're trying to connect with the energies of the wind, you may want to do this outside. The winds and in general air elementals, sylphs, prefer nature. They are not big fans of the cities. They love nature, especially the mountains, because that is where the air is the cleanest, right? Where the air is the most ozonic, where the air is the most pure. And air elementals are purists in the way that, for instance, earth elementals are not, right? They're on the very opposite sides of the spectrum as far as cleanliness and purity is concerned. Earth elementals, kind of could care less depending on who they are. Air elementals, crazy purists. They can get pretty emotional if the air is polluted. They hate any kind of toxic fumes. So if you're just starting to work with the energies of these elementals, I actually highly recommend that you go outside, and ideally you take a trip in nature. And then you want to take the time, actually like this exercise, standing up, not sitting down. And you would stand up and you would stretch your arms out and you would welcome the wind in. Now, of course, for this practice, you may want to pick a windy day. But you would be surprised, even on a day that is not windy, the moment you put an intention out to start working with the wind elementals, the wind may start blowing out of nowhere. The wind is going to come. And so first, you just want to invite the wind into your zone to work with your energies. And then, it is actually entirely possible that one of the winds is going to naturally select you. One thing that I don't want you to think, actually, which is now like a little bit of the feedback that I'm getting from the collective, is this. If I'm doing this in the summer, does it mean that the south wind is going to come? No, absolutely not. Any season, any of the four winds can come, you guys. And sometimes more than one show up at the same time. And because of that, right, you just want to be open to receive whatever comes through. So as the winds are blowing, right, first, again, depending on your level of psychic perception, you would want to invite the wind in. And then whatever wind shows up, you may ask the wind of, what kind of wind showed up. One of the four generally is going to show up. And that is actually a really, really good sign for you of which wind wants to work with you and which wind is most interested in becoming your ally. Elementals are incredibly intuitive. And so when you're starting to, have a practice like this one, they know that you've started it. And whatever happens after you do the ritual, the wind ritual, or during the wind ritual, it is no longer random because it is guided by those spirits that you're trying to reach out to. What are some of the things that are important to bring to the ritual? The wind likes getting a gift. And by the way, it has all kinds of different things that, it likes getting. But in this particular instance, the wind, what's coming through, from the wind elementals as I'm telling you this, I have to factor in their wishes. And what they're telling me right now is that they would like a ribbon, like a small piece of a ribbon. Just 1 or 2 inches is plenty. And it can be a thin ribbon or like a thick ribbon. It doesn't really matter. And it could be one of 3 colors. They either want like a small piece of white ribbon, a small piece of light blue ribbon, or a small piece of red ribbon. These are the 3 colors that they would like to receive as a gift. And it's more just a gesture, right? Like if you're showing up to a ritual, introducing yourself to an elemental, understanding that there are a being. And just because they're not corporeal doesn't mean that they're not real. And just because you've never heard of this before, again, also doesn't mean that this is not real, right? Generally, coming with gifts is the right thing to do. And essentially what you would want to do is you would want to put the ribbon in the palm of your hand or hands, right? And allow the wind to take it, right? So if the wind takes the ribbon and, blows it away, that means that your gift has been received. And if there's no wind and nobody's picking up your ribbon, try another day. Probably the day is wrong, or maybe the location is wrong. Try changing the location as well. Yeah, and other things that are really, really good to bring for you for the ritual are essential oils. Air elementals love essential oils. Your connection with the air elementals actually also is heavily dependent on your sense of smell, right? That kind of like of the physical senses, it would live, that connection is in your nose, right? So your respiratory system is incredibly tied to this element. So anything that you can smell, anything that emits a beautiful fragrance or scent is something that every single air elemental is going to want to interact with. So bring your favorite essential oils. They love the citruses. They love the florals. The florals are probably their favorite. So any type of essential oil that has a flower. They love jasmine. They love rose. They love lotus. I mean, honestly, you can't go wrong with any flower. Even if you bring them the most nondescript flower, they're still going to be happy. So they really love the florals. And they love flowers in general. So if you want to bring a couple of petals with you for the ritual, that's going to be cool as well. All right, I feel like I spent all this time just talking to you about the wind. We have so much still to get through. All right, so why don't we move on? The next one are what I would call air sprites. Now, sprite is just another name for spirit. And frankly, like I said, the etymology, the words that exist, or that remain, shall I say, in the human language, in the human tongue, as it relates to elementals, are far and in between. So any type of language around this is not going to be great. So for the lack of a better word, and in order to not have to create and recreate the wheel and create 10,000 other different terms, let's just call these air sprites. So air sprites are beings of air that essentially fill up the space around you. They range in size. Air sprites, again, it's a very general term. Air sprites range from just a couple of millimeters up to 10 feet. 10 feet is about as high as they go, as tall as they go. With about your average air sprite being between 1 foot and 3 foot tall, if you will. Now, they have humanoid forms, although they never are corporeal, right? In other words, they may emerge and take a humanoid form that you may be able to identify with your third eye. But most of them just travel in kind of like shapes that are similar to clouds, to be honest, without them being white. So they're almost like spheres of air or clumps of air or orbs of air, globules of air, however you want to think of that. And they kind of like, they float around you and they really impact the quality of air around you. For instance, if you have a really, really good relationship with air sprites, they would really protect your space quite a lot. Meaning, even if you are in a place where the air or the quality of air is suboptimal, they may protect you. For instance, like let's imagine you're in the big city. You live in a big city. Although air sprites don't love big cities, but hey, they still have to be there. Somebody has to, provide the air for everybody living in the big city. So the air sprites have to show up. That being said, if you're the one that has a good relationship with them, even if you are on the street with a bunch of cars, with all of these toxic fumes, etc., they almost like surround you and they create a shield around you without you even knowing. And your quality of air will be better, comparatively speaking. If you were to compare it to somebody, right next to you that doesn't have such a good relationship. In other words, the quality of air that you're breathing in is only partially related to the, let's say, ecological situation and geographical situation, etc., and almost more related to the kind of relationship you have with the air elementals, air sprites in this particular instance. Other things are also related to your relationship with air sprites. How often you get respiratory disease? If the answer is a lot, that means that there's something about it that is unhealed. Very often it is some karmic knot, actually, that has to do with either an air elemental or air as an element that you haven't fully healed. And so it would manifest itself in a respiratory disease. What could be an example of that? Any karma around communication or sharing your voice, a self-expression, everything that has to do with your throat chakra, actually. And for the people that have their throat chakra blocked, the number one elemental group that you need to work with are the air elementals. Everything that has to do with your voice. How does your voice come across? Do people listen to you? That's another thing, right? Because there are some people, when they speak, nobody listens. And then there are other people, when they speak, everybody listens. So that quality of being compelling as a speaker is actually not just your charisma. It's partially your charisma. And the other part is how your voice is tuned up to be received. And who does the tuning up? Air sprites, right? So air sprites would be working with you as you're growing up, unbeknownst to you, to shape and mold how your self-expression comes through. Very often, even if you befriend one or a couple of air sprites on your journey to self-expression and healing your throat area, they're going to be able to assist you in your journey. And, once you learn to communicate with them, they would even provide specific advice for you on how to unblock your throat area, for you on how to express yourself more fully, how to be empowered and feel empowered to speak your truth. All of that is air sprite energy. So that is really, really important. Another thing that these elementals, air sprites, command is your because they run air, they run the music, right? So your enjoyment of music, your ability to receive sound healing as a modality, what kind of music you listen to, etc., etc. A lot of those things are going to be determined by your relationship with the air elementals. Very often your sound healers or the people that love sound healing have a great relationship with the air elementals. And then you may have a good relationship with some, but not others. These gongs that people have sometimes during, like the sound healer sometimes would have. If you don't love the sound of the gong, it's like one of the signs that there's something that is disbalanced in your relationship with the air elementals. Or if you don't like the sound of the sound bowls, same thing here, right? Because all of those are actually quite healing sounds. And if you're not able to receive those very high vibrational frequencies, that means that you have issues or inconsistencies or karma. And very often it's ancestral karma, right? It's not even you. It's that ancestral karma that needs to be cleaned and healed before you would be able to receive that medicine. Because not everybody is able to receive the, every healing modality. And for people that have a suboptimal relationship with sylphs and air sprites, it would be hard to receive sound healing. They would just like listen to it like a bunch of noise, and then they would walk out and be like, I feel the same after the sound healing experiences as I did prior, right? And then you have people that are completely on the opposite side of the spectrum and feel like they were born anew, with this experience. So you have again, people with a very optimal relationship with the air sprites and people with a suboptimal relationship with the air sprites. Another thing, If you have a fear of air, meaning a fear of flying or a fear of heights, and by flying, I mean the airplane. I don't think there's any other flying, is there? If you're scared of airplanes, dying in an airplane crash, or just scared of heights, sometimes in large cities when they have skyscrapers, sometimes you would have these, rooms where the floor is see-through. Like the people that have panic attacks just thinking about going in that don't necessarily have a good relationship with air elementals. If you would never jump off with a parachute or any of that, or even if when you are on the plane and you hate looking, out of the window, these are all examples and kind of like giveaways, dead giveaways, that there is something for you to heal over here. Now, if you want to slowly get over your fear of the element of air and therefore flying on the airplane, and again, unfortunately, I won't be able to give you one piece of advice is going to cover 100% of the cases. Because for some of you, this is past life trauma, and past life trauma ain't going to be healed by you talking to an elemental. I hate to say this, but let's say you're not the person that has past life trauma around this. It would be actually easier for you to get comfortable around flying if you could build a trusted relationship with air sprites. And trust me, they want to build that relationship with you. And then when you have that relationship, these air sprites have the ability to protect you because they run the show when you're up in the air. And because they run the show, you are going to be fully protected. And more often than not, these elementals that you have a good relationship with are going to walk you through, that whole process and, give you comfort, almost like stay in your head for the duration of the flight, letting you know what's happening, any type of turbulence, the why, and everything. So highly recommend befriending air elementals if you are worried of flying. Another way, actually, so now let's talk about improving like the relationship with air elementals and like what are the ways of getting there. Purifying, let's start with purifying the air in your apartment or your place of work, right? Purifying and humidifying the air, right? Getting houseplants to purify the air around you and taking care of the houseplants, right? Because air elementals, they really have a symbiotic relationship with the plant kingdom. From, flowers to bushes to trees, grasses, you name it. The entire plant kingdom are allies, great allies of the air elementals. And so they really don't take it too well when you are abusing their buddies and their friends, right? If you just accidentally hurt a tree or cut down the tree without, the necessary feeling like of gratitude or asking for permission, if you just go around, the block ripping flower heads off the stems and, just being careless with the plant kingdom or unintentional or hurtful to the plant kingdom, you're going to start developing karma around, with the plant kingdom as well as the air elementals. Because again, it is a symbiotic relationship. So one breeds the other, one feeds the other, right? So taking care of your house plants, making sure that actually planting trees or planting a tree could be a really, really good intentional ritual to start healing that relationship. Quitting smoking if you're smoking or any type of other pollution of the air. Unfortunately, the gas that you put in the car is not something that air elementals enjoy. So they would probably much rather you had an electric car, if I'm being honest. So, and in general, like if you're driving a lot, they're not big fans of that, again, because it pollutes the air. If you're using a lot of aerosols, they don't really love aerosols, especially the ones that have a nasty smell like hairspray. Listen, this is not to tell you that, okay, now you have to give up hairspray and driving, because those are extremes, you guys. And that's what I'm getting from the collective. Like, should we not have a car now? That's not what it is. I'm just like giving you the full spectrum and providing you all the things that these elementals love and they don't love. By the way, if you're going to really start making an effort, and the first and foremost thing is to really talk to them, again, use automated writing. If you don't hear things in your head, that's totally fine. And I've mentioned this technique, the automated writing, so many times, and this time I'm not going to explain how to do it. In other words, if you start treating them like they're real beings, despite them being invisible, you're going to notice that they are extremely prone to forgiving you and cutting you some slack. So just remember that and know that. So don't be prescriptive even with yourself. And again, everything that I'm saying, especially around relationship with elementals, is meant to be gestural, right? It's not a hard and fast rule. It's not the Bible. It is mere a suggestion. Some people are going to need 10 things to do 10 things off the list, and other people are going to need to do half a thing on the list to get what they're trying to go. It all depends on your personal relationship with these elementals, on your personal karma and your ancestors' karma dealing with these folks. Again, like I said, they love essential oils. So anytime you're working with essential oils, now I'm back to giving you suggestions. If I'm switching topics really quickly here, but going back to what else you could do to build those relationships. They really love essential oils. They love, when you have nice fragrances. There's no, again, hard and fast rule around what fragrances they enjoy. But let's just say they like tasty smells when you're preparing food. And, so, and the opposite, the opposite is also true, right? Like they hate the smell of something that's burned, right? Which is not to say that they hate fire elementals, because air elementals and fire elementals are buddies and they play very well together. So if you're burning a fire, the air elementals are not going to have a problem with that. But for instance, if you burned a steak on a pan, they're not going to quite love it. And they, in general, I don't think they would take too well to you, prepping meats anyhow, because meat doesn't smell good to them when it's being cooked. Okay. Another thing that I will tell you, if you want to improve the relationship with the air sprites, going to mountainous areas and staying there for a prolonged amount of time and doing breath work, ideally combined. Another thing, right, is yoga. Yoga really helps you balance out a lot of things, but one of them is your relationship with the air elementals and the element of air. So going to a mountainous area with, high altitudes is potentially challenging, right? And if you really are getting to those areas and you get out of breath really quickly, again, there's an opportunity for you to improve your relationship with the element of air. If you're not able to hold your breath for, a while, maybe longer than the average, this is also, another dead giveaway. That means that your lungs are not functioning properly. And again, those are all correlated to not having a great relationship with the elementals of air. But breath work is going to get you there very, very quickly. So even if you don't do anything else and you just take breath work as a practice, doesn't even have to be daily, maybe weekly. 1 10-15 minute session of intentional breath work could really help you fix your relationship with air sprites. All right. Moving on, I think. Why don't we talk about the muses next? The muses are an interesting, super fascinating class of air elementals. Remember how I told you that everything that has to do with self-expression is very much controlled by the air elementals? So creativity is no different, especially if we're talking like high-level creativity, something that you feel inspired to create, and especially if it feels like you're in the flow, like you're creating in the flow. One type of air elemental that's going to help you create masterpieces are the muses. Now, the muses actually, if you start Googling them, what's in the collective is, well, most people don't believe the muses are real. Let's start there. But for the ones that, are somehow admitting that they may be real, they think of them as the Greek goddesses. It's just like, okay, there was a pantheon, there were the muses, and they died, and now there's nobody. So there are 9 most important muses, although there are 9 secondary muses as well that predominantly work with the energies of planet Earth. So there are 18 muses total. They all were daughters of a Greek goddess, Mnemosyne, who was the goddess of, memory, among other things. She's also the goddess of flowers. She's the goddess of the song. Mnemosyne is wonderful. She's very nurturing. She has very, very wonderful motherly energies. So Mnemosyne had a lot of daughters. And because she was a patron of the arts, she commissioned her daughters to work with humanity to create more art. And then she gave them specialties. And so Mnemosyne has 9, like I said, very well-known daughters. And then she has others that are lesser known. And so collectively, these 18 muses are working with humanity up to this day, right? They actually didn't go anywhere. Neither are they goddesses, for that matter. The muses are actually air elementals. And Mnemosyne herself is very much connected to the element of air, because memory is actually connected to the element of air as well, and the Akashic records. So the reason I love the muses is because there's a very, very practical way for you to work with them. Whereas I think working with the winds can be a little bit more esoteric in nature. And I think the same could be true about air sprites. Muses are extremely, extremely instrumental, because one of the reasons that they were created in the first place is to assist and support humanity in its creative endeavors. Whether you are a writer, whether you are a painter, a musician, a composer, even if you are, let's say, like an architect or a designer or a dancer or a singer, a director of movies, an actress, it doesn't really matter, like anything in the creative field, makeup artist, I could keep going, right? In order to create true masterpieces, in order to create things that have never been done before, in order to elevate your craft, you need inspiration. But not just inspiration. The muses are actually, so they're, let me maybe rewind. The muses are all female. They are, technically speaking, if they're going to be interacting with you, they are about 5 inches long. And they're very thin, so they kind of look like little fairies, but they don't have any wings. And they just float in space, kind of like almost like they would float in a bubble. Sometimes they come in a bubble, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they would just float up. And they are it's very easy to see them with your third eye. So the thing with the muses is very often the muse selects you. You don't select the muse. And in order for you actually to make sure that you have the muse that's going to be your patron, and that's going to help you get to that state of creative flow and get you out of the stuck zone. So one easy way to get there is actually to build a relationship with our mother. So Mnemosyne is a deity that, she's largely forgotten these days. Because of that, it's actually the good news, right? If you start calling in on her in your meditation, she's definitely going to come, because she's not that busy. And because she's not that busy, you almost have an in. And I kid you not, guys, this could be your competitive advantage. Like, if you think this is woo, just give it a shot. Give it a try. So connect to Mnemosyne in a meditation is what you should do. And ask her to, essentially tell her about yourself and the creative endeavor that you're working on. By the way, a business is also a creative endeavor, if that helps. It all depends, right? If you want to be inspired in business, for instance, you're changing something, you're shifting something, you're innovating, you're disrupting a space. That is all a creative process, right? And so you can talk to Mnemosyne, and she's going to help you by assigning one of her daughters to be your muse. Then you get to meet that muse. And you always want to find out what her name is and what kind of projects she generally helps with. And, you can also ask the muse the questions of what she believes is most in the way of you creating a masterpiece or, working on the project that you're working on. What are the impediments and how she can help, right? So essentially, every relationship between the creator and the muse is unique. There's no one template. There's no one right way of doing it. There's no wrong way of doing it for that matter either. However, it is all about establishing the relationship with that muse. Very often when you are in the process of creation, prior to sitting down, and let me maybe give you an example with a writer. Let's say there is a writer. The muses are actually especially amazing if you're a fiction writer. If you're a nonfiction writer, and let's say you're writing a dictionary, maybe the muse is not the most important thing for you, right? There may be other elementals that are a little bit more preferable for you to work with. However, for anything that's truly creative, like composing a song or, I don't know, thinking, like writing a script for a movie or anything that you like, it's not a very logical process, your muse is your helper. So the first thing is before you're sitting down to write, and let's use that example of a writer, every single time, if you're writing every day, you would want to do this every single day. But once a day is fine. You don't need to like redo it 60 times a day. You would ask your muse to come and you would call in on her by using her name. Such and such, I'm ready to write. Could you please assist in the process? And then you want to close your eyes and wait for a couple of minutes for the muse to do her work. Now, she generally shows up right away. They would show up right away. However, they may need to make certain energetic alignments actually in your body so that your body is able to receive the flow. Very often, this is chakra work. So unbeknownst to you, they're going to be aligning your chakras. And they're going to be aligning your chakras towards the middle of your body. So right along your spinal cord. Now, granted, you can do it yourself or you can use the muse. And then they do other things, right? Very often they would need to set up your crown chakra space because that is where you get your inspiration from, truly, for like innovative things, right? So they may do work around your head area. And again, they're quite small, and so they float around you and, they help you with all those things. And then very often when you start creating, they actually sit on your shoulder. The muses prefer to sit on your right shoulder, just FYI. And so essentially they would just sit on the shoulder. They don't weigh anything. So, and they're just going to be guiding you through the process. I kid you not, some of the best, and I mean the best masterpieces of humanity have been created because the muses were participating. Now, was it a conscious, decision on the part of the creator every single time? Absolutely not. However, if you don't want to wait around and see if a muse selects you out of the goodness of her heart, and if you want to make the process of creation a little bit more intentional, then it's actually highly advisable for you to introduce yourself to the muse and get her to help you knowingly, intentionally, instead of just saying, well, I don't know, maybe the muse is going to select me, or spending day after day after day having writer's block or whatever other creative block that you have, if you know what I mean. Okay, I wanted to see, there are other elementals that I want to talk to you about in the air kingdom, but I feel this is kind of getting long, and I promise myself that I'm going to start making these shorter. So why don't we move really quickly to the Q&A section around the air elementals, anything that I spoke about today or anything that I didn't speak of today. If you have a question around this topic, I am ready to receive the question as long as it serves the collective. The question is, you mentioned all the ways that I can tell that my relationship with air elementals is suboptimal. what are some of the ways to heal it outside of the ones that you have already named? Okay, I guess we can go deeper on the healing side. Another way of working with the air elementals could be working with your throat chakra. So any type of meditation you do on your throat chakra, and in general, working with the energies of color blue or color white. So whether you're working with blue flame or you're working with white flame, or for instance, you're just working, and it doesn't have to be the flame, right? But for instance, you're calling those colors into your vicinity, into your auric field, that is going to help you. That is going to help you build that relationship. Finding your voice and getting comfortable around expressing your voice can also help you build a stronger relationship with the elementals inadvertently and with the element of air. If you don't feel liberated enough, if you don't feel comfortable enough or confident enough to talk and express yourself with, a spoken word, then another way to start healing that center is to write things out, right? Writing is always a precursor because writing still takes you through that process of self-expression. And, it's just going to remain on paper. It doesn't have to be fully given to another human being, right? And then also reading your own communication. Another really cool way that I love, that I have around healing your relationship with your word, healing your relationship with the element of air is this. When you're going through something that's, let's say, very emotional, but you don't feel like you can communicate, or there is nobody in your life, maybe you don't have a best friend, or maybe, a lot of people don't have a therapist. A lot of people don't have a spouse that's just available to listen to their emotional turmoil for 3 hours a day. If you don't have that, but you're going through a lot, and by the way, a lot of you guys are going through a lot right now, so I'll give you credit for that. Take out one of the voice recording apps on your phone and just record a stream of consciousness type of audio. However long that takes, just get things off your chest. You would be surprised how good it feels. But there is a second part to this practice. Re-listen to your own recording. So first you would communicate, and then you would re-listen to the same recording. So that would also enable you to feel like you have been heard. And frankly, the most important person that could hear you is you, right? Very often when we feel unheard or suppressed, it's because a part of ourselves is rejecting our own communication. It's not something else. It's not anything else, right? So the simple act of hearing yourself speak can do wonders for your self-expression, can do wonders for your communication. And again, breath work is also very important. If breath work sounds too fancy, or it sounds like you're going to have to go through multiple schools or find yourself a guru, don't worry about that. Then just practice simple breaths. You can do a simple exercise of chakral breaths. All that is breathing in deeply into each of your chakras one by one. So you would be inhaling, and on the inhale, you would send the air down to your root center, and then you would exhale. And then you would do the same thing and send it to the next chakra up, so to your sacral. And so you would go through all the 7 chakras, right? And that would be your one full loop of breath. And then you can do the same thing one more time. The same thing one more time. The same thing one more time. One thing you didn't ask me about, but I wanted to talk about here is clairalience. Clairalience is one of the clairs, and it's essentially the clear sense of smell, which is connected to your relationship with the element of air, or the air elementals. Very often, if clairalience opens up in your body or for you, it is because air elementals are sending you a big gift. So always know that this is a gift, and always know that this is a great sign. Now, maybe about 0.5% of humanity even has this gift, but I figured I would mention it anyway. What is a lot of people know what clairaudience is and clairvoyance is. Not a lot of people really have experienced clairalience. Essentially, this is another way, very often for air elementals, as well as some of your spirit guides to communicate to you some of the very important information. It could be that you would be sitting in a cafe or a library or something, and then it just smells really, really strange. But then if you ask some of the people around you, they may not sense anything. They're like, no, it smells fine. What do you mean, right? Very often, your clairalience is going to make itself known through this kind of situations where you're the only one feeling a smell or sensing a smell, whether that is a positive or a negative smell, if that makes sense. Whether that is a pleasant or unpleasant smell, I should say, not positive, negative. But I think you got me. Essentially, this is your own language. One thing I'll tell you about clairalience is this. There's no dictionary that would enable you to understand what smelling something when it's not there, when there's no physical object that would smell that way, means. It is your own language of communicating with air elementals, but it is always a consistent sign. For instance, if air elementals picked the smell of rotten garbage to denote the presence of demons so that you can smell it and get out of there, they would keep sending you the same exact smell for the same exact phenomena. And by the way, you can talk to them and ask them why they're sending you a certain type of smell. Very often they would send you a floral smell in places that are very optimal for you energetically, or when your spirit guides are around, or if the angels are around, or if you're just meant to be. Sometimes smelling the certain flowers, especially divine flowers like a lily or a rose or a lotus, can be the same thing as seeing 11:11 on the clock, which essentially means that you're on alignment, you're on the path. So if you're making a decision and you're leaning a certain way, all of a sudden the smell of roses comes out of nowhere, it's probably the air elementals or your guides talking to you, and they want you to know that the answer is yes. Let me take one more question from the collective around the air elementals or anything that we spoke about today. Let me know. I'm ready to receive. How do we know? The question is, how do we know if we need to build a relationship with the wind elementals? Honestly, this is a choice. Nobody really has to do anything, right? It is my greatest honor to tell you about the things that exist and to offer that up to you. And it is up, essentially it would come down to your choice of what energies you want to interact with and what energies you don't. Generally speaking, right, not every single elemental connection is created equal. I've given you 5 different types of elementals in the episode about fire, and it may have been that absolutely 0 of them resonated with you, and that's completely fine. And it may have been that all 5 resonated with you. Again, you would naturally already have a propensity for 1 or 2 or 3 elements. So let's start there, right? If a particular element resonates with you and you love it naturally and you kind of know that about yourself, then you may choose to connect with as many elementals of that kingdom, if that makes sense, as possible, right? And if you're not resonating with air, then you can just take this as an FYI and never meet another, air elemental in your life, and that would be completely fine. I'm just, letting you know what's available to you, and from there, the world's your oyster. All right, my dear ones. I have so many more things to talk to you about as it relates to air elementals. We're going to have to do another episode on this. So I think that is it for today. Thank you for sticking around. I hope this was helpful to you. And yes, we'll meet again for round 2 of this really soon. Thanks so much and take care.